call this meeting of the Riverside City Council for Thursday, November 1st, 2012 to order. And we'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Kirk.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Next on the agenda is consider the approval of the minutes of the October 18, 2012 council meeting. Is there a motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Denning, second by Mr. Schock. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Next thing is, if you would like to speak to the council, we ask you to please fill out a sheet and make sure it comes up either side of the dais, and we will get to your issue when we get to that time of the agenda. Next thing is City Manager's report. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have my report included in your packet as well as additional information. Be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. As always, you can expect my weekly manager report tomorrow via email.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Is there any discussion for the manager?
I have, do we know when the McDonald's is going to start up in Airway Shopping Center area?
We do not. They have submitted their site plan. That was reviewed. Comments were sent back to the applicant for corrections and addressing. We have not received a reply back on our notes and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Denning. Any other discussions? Mr. Flonkamp.
Mr. City Manager, about the street lighting agreement that we have with Miami Valley Lighting. I was wondering, I don't know very much about the city's lighting system, what lights, how many lights we're responsible for. I was wondering if it would be possible to bring those residential lighting systems into the same sort of an agreement where the residents could be assessed less for their street lighting, or are they already involved in this process?
We actually signed a contract, I believe it was 2 years ago, with DPL Energy that reduced the electric lighting for streetlights. I believe it was by about 20%. The next meeting, we will be bringing forward legislation to incorporate the City of Riverside with the MVCC contract for its remaining 3 years for streetlights. So it'll be 2013, 14, and 15. And each one of those years, we are projecting to lower the total cost each year by $37,000 each year.
But that's for the city-run system, correct?
That is for all streetlights.
All street lighting?
Yes.
So all the assessments, for instance, the Chesterfield, I live on Chesterfield.
Yes.
So there's a Chesterfield
Yes.
assessment. That lighting assessment will be associated with these rates.
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or discussion for the manager?
Yes, I have
Yes,
one.
Mr. Schock.
There is a lighting district where it's not assessed. Is that changed at all?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. The only street lighting system that we do not assess is the Center of Flight street lighting district.
Not the old Riverside.
Yeah, the old Village of Riverside.
The whole old village of Riverside is not assessed.
Right.
That was my understanding.
I would have to look and see. I'm not.
It's not, as far as I know, it's not.
Unless something really weird
Yeah.
has happened
Right.
that we didn't see, it is not.
So that doesn't change it, so you don't.
I'm not familiar enough with all of the districts to be able to answer that question one way or the other. What I can tell you is through the process that we've run the last 2 years relative to the Valley View subdivision in comparison to the other lighting districts that we have, there have been inconsistencies in how we do that. So earlier this year, I had several communications with my counterparts through the OCMA listserv on how those communities handle street lighting assessment. So what we will have to do is we will have to find a way, based on the information that we've received from them, advice from legal counsel, we are attempting to provide a uniform method in which assessment districts, street lighting assessment districts are handled. I can say one of the issues that has been ever present is how the street lighting districts were formed prior to the city's incorporation. So the vast majority of those documents, at least as they related to the city, as I understand it, were destroyed in a flood event several years ago. So some of the initial documentation on how those districts were created and the petitions that are relative to those districts are no longer in our possession. And so there are some legal issues that come into play in how we handle those. So that could be, if the old village area is not assessed, that could be one of the factors as to why it is not. So I will have to look into that in greater detail when we bring forward our new assessment package sometime in 2013.
Yeah, if you could pull up any of the property deeds, if I'm saying that correctly, where it lists with all assessments and taxes that's on them, you'll see any of the properties in the village, the lighting is not assessed.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions for the manager?
So who's paying for the lighting there?
It's paid from just general fund, yeah.
That was an agreement made years and years ago.
Many, many years ago.
Many years.
Don't tell me how long.
Okay, all right, seeing no more discussion for the city manager's report, we'll move on to public comment on agenda items. Again, if you would like to talk to the council, please fill out a speaker registration form and give it to us so we can talk about it when we get to that part of the meeting. Right now, we do have a person who would like to talk about a topic on the agenda item, but I don't know what that is. You want, no, not on the agenda?
No.
Oh, okay, then I will scratch that off, and we'll get to you in a little bit, thank you. All right, next thing on the agenda is unfinished business. First unfinished business is ordinance number 120499. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance is to set employee titles, numbers, positions, and ranges for 2013 and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. This is the second reading, so at this time I'll entertain a motion to approve the second reading and final adoption of the ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Deputy Mayor Denning, second by Mr. Schott. Would the clerk please read the ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 12-0-499. Ordinance to approve employee position titles, number of positions, and pay ranges, and to repeal ordinance 110483 adopted December 29th, 2011.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions or discussions from members of council? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Okay, and the next thing on the agenda is new business, and the first new business is ordinance number 120502. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance was brought forward to make permanent appropriations for fiscal year 2013.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. This will be the first reading, so at this time I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance.
So moved.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Denning, second by Mr. Fulenkamp. The charter requires that the first reading of the ordinance be read aloud in its entirety prior to a council's vote for adoption. So, Madam Clerk, would you please read the ordinance in its entirety?
Ordinance number 12-0-502. An ordinance to make permanent appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Riverside, state of Ohio for the period between January 1 through December 31st, 2013. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Riverside, State of Ohio, Section 1, that to provide for the current expenses and other expenditures of said City of Riverside, State of Ohio for the period January 1 through December 31st, 2013, the sums and amounts as listed in Exhibit A attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference thereto under appropriations be and the same are hereby set aside and appropriated from the general fund and various departments and other funds. Section 2, that finance director is hereby authorized to draw his warrants for payments from any of the foregoing appropriations upon receiving proper certificates and vouchers, therefore approved by the Board of Officers authorized by law to approve the same, or in ordinance or resolution of council to make the expenditures, provided that no warrant shall be drawn or paid for salaries or wages except to persons employed by the authority and in accordance with the law of ordinance. Section 3, that the city manager be and is hereby authorized and directed to implement the appropriations as detailed above. Section 4, that this ordinance being an appropriation ordinance shall go into immediate effect as provided by the charter and the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any questions or discussions from members of council? Now, we're just having the first reading, is that correct? All right. I thought I heard something different, but okay, that's fine. Okay. Okay, is there any other discussion from members of council? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Very good. And thank you, staff. Thank you, Finance Director Garrett. Thank you for all your work and for everybody. I know everyone worked really hard on this. Mr. Manager, Assistant City Manager, thank you all for the work you did on this, and thanks to council for getting through this. All right. Next thing on the agenda is ordinance number 120503. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to the request of council, this ordinance is brought forward to amend chapter 181 of the city's administrative code regarding income tax and the credit therefor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the first reading of the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Deputy Mayor Denning, seconded by Mr. Schott. City charter requires the first reading of the ordinance be read aloud in its entirety prior to council's vote for adoption. Madam Clerk, would you please read the ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment that this be earmarked to capital improvements.
Okay, I don't,
Can I read it?
So-
Is this where I want, yeah, this is where I want. So that the extra tax money that we collect is earmarked for capital improvements, so that this will be used for streets, major equipment that we need to buy, and things like that. I don't, if we're gonna approve it, we don't necessarily want it just going into the general fund. We need to earmark it to something specific.
You want to put an extra?
I was gonna say, that needs to be in the motion then, I believe, because that is not the intent of it right now, my understanding.
It's not in, yeah, it's not in the legislation.
No, I think this is, I mean, this is just for putting it into the general fund. Can we do it by motion? Can we earmark it by motion?
You can amend the legislation to demonstrate that you want those revenues assigned for a specific purpose. You can do that. You can, whether or not you want to incorporate it into this particular piece of legislation, whether or not you want to bring forward a second piece of legislation that would, in effect, do the same thing, you have the ability to do that as well. However, council wants to approach the issue that Mr. Denning has brought up is fine, but either way works.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor right now, so unless we want to amend that motion or do as the city manager said, approve this and then have another piece of legislation come later, is that what, that would earmark it, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Or Mr. Mayor, may I throw out one more suggestion? Let's just go ahead and vote on the 503 and see if it
See if it even passes. Yeah.
Then if it passes, then go ahead and do the amendment as necessary.
Okay, thank you. Is that, so you're okay with that, Mr. Denny?
I'm not sure that that's the way, can we do it that way?
Assuming that it passes tonight on the first reading, the best way to address the matter you brought forward is we would bring forward another ordinance at the next meeting, and you would, in effect, have first and second reading on the 15th, the same night that you are having the second reading on this particular legislation, so that they would go into effect at the same time. So basically what the next ordinance would say is, 120504, whereas council passed ordinance 502, council further directs that such revenues derived from the income tax, the reduction of the income tax credit be specifically earmarked for the purposes of yada, 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 yada.
Well, in this case too, if it does pass, on the first reading,
Then
also we should consider about putting a, expiration date on it, if I may say. This ordinance is only good for 3 years and renewable after 3 years or 5 years, or, something like that. That's something else which everybody would keep in mind too.
Well, just as quickly as we pass this, in 3 or 5 years, we can rescind it, so.
Well, I'd rather have it there
Yeah,
because the council,
it's totally
body
up to
might
council
change.
whether they want to do that.
Yeah, on there.
We can resend it at any time.
Just a thought.
Okay, so there's been a motion, and have we?
In a
where are we at?
second, and she's about ready to
Ready to
read it.
read it, okay, and Madam Clerk, would you please read the ordinance?
And the motion is just to approve the first reading, correct?
Yes.
Ordinance number 12-0-503, an ordinance amending Title 7, Chapter 181, income tax sections 181.15 and repealing the existing Chapter 181, Section 181.15 of the Administrative Code of the City of Riverside, Ohio. Be it ordained by council of the City of Riverside, State of Ohio, Section 1, that Chapter 181, income tax, Section 151.15 is set forth in Exhibit A attached here to and incorporated herein as if fully set forth is hereby enacted. Section 2, that existing Chapter 181 income tax, Section 181.15 is hereby repealed. Section 3, that this ordinance shall take effect and be in full force from and after January 1st, 2013.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any discussion from members of council? Mr. Fulenkamp. Ms. Fulenkamp,
Discussion first.
discussion first, yes.
I want to make sure this accomplishes, the wording here accomplishes what we're after in terms of the 50% tax. And how are we giving the credit? The language is a little confusing. I think you understand what we're after. We're after 0.75% income tax for people that would specifically in places like, say, Dayton, or places that have equal or higher tax rates than we do. So I'm assuming the language that says, shall allow a credit against the tax imposed by this chapter covers the fact that we're talking about our tax rate, not the tax rate in the city that people might work.
Yes,
Am I correct in that assumption? So all I want to know is, are we getting what we're asking for? And the language to me wasn't clear to me. I read a number.
and we had several reiterations of the language